The misdirected message. Olivia Reyes pulled her rain-soaked scrubs from her locker, replacing them with a dry sweater that smelled faintly of hospital disinfectant despite 3 washes. 14 hours into what should have been a 12-hour shift, her body ached with the particular exhaustion that came from keeping 3 critical patients alive through the night. "You look like you wrestled with the rain and lost," said Prish, her fellow nurse, applying lip balm to chapped lips. "That's exactly what happened." Olivia attempted a smile but managed only a grimace. "The umbrella I bought last week flipped inside out the moment I stepped outside." Memorial General's staff exit led directly to the employee parking lot, offering zero protection from Seattle's relentless November downpour. As Olivia trudged toward her aging Honda, puddles embraced her ankles despite her best efforts to avoid them. Inside her car, she sat motionless, watching raindrops race down her windshield. Too tired to start the engine, her phone buzzed from the passenger seat. Unknown number. Olivia ignored it, allowing the call to redirect to voicemail as she finally turned the key in the ignition. The little car sputtered to life on the second try, and she mentally calculated how many more shifts before she could afford to have it properly serviced by the time Olivia reached her small apartment in the Ballard neighborhood. Sleep deprivation had thickened her thoughts to molasses. She barely registered feeding her cat, Gatsby, before collapsing onto her bed fully clothed, damp hair creating a halo of moisture on her pillow. Morning arrived with persistent sunlight streaming through blinds she'd forgotten to close. Olivia reached for her phone to check the time and noticed a text notification from the unknown number that had called the previous night. "I apologize for the late call. I believe I dialed incorrectly. This message was meant for my foundation director regarding the Memorial General funding proposal." Olivia stared at the message. Her nurse's curiosity piqued despite her exhaustion. Memorial General had been struggling for funding, particularly for the pediatric trauma center where she often picked up extra shifts. "No problem," she typed back. "Wrong numbers happen. Good luck with your proposal." She expected that to end the exchange, but 3 dots appeared immediately. "You work at Memorial." Olivia hesitated. Normally, she wouldn't engage with strangers, but something about the formal tone seemed harmless enough. "I'm a nurse there. Night shift. Trauma department. Difficult work, especially these days." The simple acknowledgement brought unexpected tears to her eyes. Few people understood the weight nurses carried, particularly since the pandemic had transformed healthcare forever. "It is," she replied, "but necessary. The world needs more people willing to do necessary difficult things." Olivia smiled at that. "Are you always this philosophical with wrong numbers? Only the ones who respond." Something about his message made her laugh aloud, startling Gatsby from his perch on the WINDOWSILL over coffee and slightly stale toast. Olivia found herself continuing the conversation. The stranger asked thoughtful questions about healthcare challenges without the typical platitudes people offered when learning she was a nurse. When he asked about the hospital's needs, she described the pediatric trauma center's outdated equipment without thinking. "Why pediatric trauma specifically?" he asked. "Because children shouldn't have to suffer for our failures," she typed, then hesitated before adding. "My brother died from injuries sustained in a car accident when he was 8. The hospital wasn't equipped properly. That's why I became a nurse." For several minutes the 3 dots appeared and disappeared. Finally, "I understand personal motivation. Mine came from watching my mother struggle with undiagnosed multiple sclerosis for years while doctors dismissed her symptoms." Dominic Harlow set his phone down, surprised by his own candor. From his penthouse overlooking Lake Washington, he could see rainfall beginning again, shrouding the Cascade Mountains in mist. Few people knew about his mother's struggles. It wasn't included in any interviews or company biographies. His assistant, Josephine, knocked softly before entering with his morning schedule. "The foundation needs final approval on the Memorial General proposal," she reminded him. Dominic nodded, thoughts still on the accidental exchange with the unknown nurse. "Tell them to double the equipment allocation for pediatric trauma." Josephine raised an eyebrow but made the note without comment. After 15 years working together, she'd learned to recognize when Dominic's quiet intuition was guiding his decisions. Digital whispers. The rain had finally relented, giving way to one of Seattle's rare November summers. Olivia sat on her small balcony, enjoying the momentary warmth while scrolling through 3 days of accumulated text messages from the mysterious, wrong number she'd privately begun calling Foundation. Guy in her head. "Do nurses ever become desensitized to suffering?" his latest message asked. Olivia's fingers hovered over the screen. Most people asked about dramatic surgeries or celebrity patients, not the emotional labor of healthcare work. "Not desensitized," she replied carefully. "We develop compartments, like underwater sections of a ship that can be sealed off when damaged. You learn to close certain doors during a shift, then open them later when it's safe." She pressed send, then frowned. Too revealing, perhaps. This strange digital friendship had evolved from occasional messages to daily exchanges, often late at night when her shift ended, or mysteriously, when he seemed to be working odd hours as well. Gatsby leaped onto the balcony railing, interrupting her thoughts. "What am I doing, Gats?" she murmured, scratching behind his ears. having deep conversations with a complete stranger while avoiding calls from my actual friends. Her phone chimed with his response. That's the most honest description of emotional resilience I've ever heard. Something warm unfurled in her chest. Before she could reply, another message arrived. What keeps your ship sailing? Olivia smiled, appreciating the continuation of her metaphor. Small victories, a patient's first steps after trauma. My grandmother's empanada's recipe. Dawn light after night shifts. The moment coffee hits the bloodstream. She paused, then added, what about you, mystery texter? What keeps your ship watertight? Across the lake. Dominic read her message while his executive team discussed quarterly projections in the background. Harlow Innovations had grown from his garage startup into a tech empire specializing in medical diagnostic software. But these meetings had long ago lost their ability to fully engage his attention. Problem solving, he typed back. Creating solutions that matter. Quiet mornings. Books printed on actual paper. The knowledge that everything built can be rebuilt better. CFO Terrence Wilson cleared his throat pointedly. Dominic, your thoughts on the Singapore expansion? Dominic slipped his phone into his jacket pocket. Proceed with a timeline, Blake suggested, but double the research staff allocation. We need local expertise, not just office space. The meeting continued, but Dominic's thoughts drifted back to Olivia. He knew her only as Nurse MG, from the initials in her text signature. Their conversations had become a curious refuge from the isolation of his position. People treated billionaires like another species, approaching with either excessive deference or thinly veiled agenda. But this nurse spoke to him as simply another human being navigating life's complexities. Later that evening, as Olivia prepared for another night shift, her phone lit up again. Hypothetical, if you could solve one problem at your hospital, regardless of cost, what would it be? She answered without hesitation. Time. I'd manufacture more of it for patients with their loved ones before critical moments. Technological solution. Teleportation devices for family members to reach bedsides instantly. His response came quickly. Ambitious. I like it. More practical alternative while my teleportation division gets funding. Olivia laughed aloud in the empty staff locker room. Dedicated family comfort spaces in every department, with actual comfortable chairs, good coffee and private areas for difficult conversations. Hospitals designed for medical efficiency, not human emotions. At Memorial General, the night unfolded with the controlled chaos that defined trauma work. 2 car accidents, an elderly fall patient, and a teenager with a suspected overdose. Olivia moved between them with practiced efficiency, her exhaustion temporarily suspended by the adrenaline of urgency. During a rare quiet moment near 3 a.m., she checked her phone, finding a new message. Do you believe coincidences have meaning? An odd question for the middle of the night. Depends. Are we talking serendipity or statistical probability? Both. I'm currently standing in Memorial General's north entrance. Olivia froze, suddenly uneasy. Was her mystery texter some kind of stalker? Before she could formulate a response, he continued. Board meeting ran late. Foundation, proposal, presentation. Don't worry, not trying to meet. Just strange to think we're in the same building while having this conversation. Relief mixed with curiosity flooded through her. Very strange indeed. Good luck with your foundation, people. We need all the help we can get around here. She slipped her phone away as Dr. Westbrook approached the nurse's station, his face grave. Reyes, we have incoming trauma. Multi-vehicle accident on I-5, ETA 4 minutes. The remainder of her shift disappeared in a blur of urgent interventions. By morning, Olivia had helped save 3 lives and lost one, an elderly man whose injuries proved too extensive. As she documented her final notes, the hospital administrator, Director Fitzgerald, walked through with a group of suits, their polished appearances jarringly out of place amidst the clinical setting. One man lingered slightly behind the others, tall with dark hair peppered with silver at the temples. Unlike his companions, he actually made eye contact with the staff they passed. When his gaze met Olivia's momentarily, she felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity before he continued down the hallway. Back in her apartment, Olivia collapsed into bed but found sleep elusive despite her exhaustion. She reached for her phone. Rough night shift. How did your board meeting go? The reply came surprisingly quickly. Productive. They approved the funding proposal. Tell me about your rough night. So Olivia did, describing the accident victims, the lost patient, the emotional toll. Writing to this stranger had become oddly therapeutic. I've been thinking about your ship compartments, he responded. Who helps the nurse seal the damaged sections? In the growing light of dawn, Olivia's eyes filled with unexpected tears. That's the question no one ever asks, she typed, her vulnerability protected by digital distance. The answer is, usually no one. Dominic Harlow read her words from the solitude of his car, parked alongside Lake Washington. He had driven here directly after leaving the hospital, troubled by the exhaustion he'd witnessed on the faces of the night shift staff. Perhaps, he wrote carefully, that's a ship-designed flaw worth addressing. He hesitated before sending his next message. Would it be inappropriate to ask your name? I'm David. A lie felt necessary but uncomfortable. For the first time in years, Dominic had found someone who spoke to him without the distortion field of his wealth and reputation. He wasn't ready to surrender that rare connection. Olivia stared at his question, weighing the risks of increased personal disclosure against the comfort these exchanges had brought her. Olivia, she finally responded. My name is Olivia. Fractured pixels. Morning sunlight spilled across the conference table where Dominic sat reviewing the Memorial General implementation plans. The pediatric trauma center upgrades would begin next month, including the family comfort spaces that David and Olivia had discussed in their late-night exchanges. You seem distracted, Josephine observed, sliding a coffee toward him. After nearly 2 decades as his right hand, she'd developed an almost supernatural ability to read his moods. Just considering some adjustments to the hospital proposal, Dominic replied, taking a grateful sip of the perfectly prepared coffee. The board already approved it unanimously, Josephine reminded him, and it's generous by any standard. $20 million for equipment upgrades, staff expansion, and facility improvements. Dominic nodded absently. Add a dedicated staff wellness center, private spaces for breaks, quality food service, psychological support resources. Josephine made notes without questioning the addition. You've become quite invested in Memorial General specifically. Any particular reason? The image of Olivia's tired eyes flashed in his mind. That brief moment their gazes had connected in the hospital corridor. He'd recognized her immediately from the staff photo on the trauma department's webpage, though she had no idea who he truly was. Their trauma care serves the entire region, he replied neutrally. It's a logical investment. His phone vibrated with a new message. Olivia, strange development at work today. Rumor mill says some tech billionaire is funding a massive upgrade to our department. Staff betting pool on which Silicon Valley type is behind it. Current frontrunner is that reclusive Harlow guy because he apparently had some relative treated here once. Dominic's coffee suddenly tasted bitter. The double life he'd been leading for nearly 6 weeks now felt increasingly complicated. What had begun as an accidental text exchange that had evolved into daily conversations that had become the most honest human connection in his life, built on a foundation of partial truth. Any insider information from your foundation connections, Olivia continued. The nurses are planning a celebration for whoever this mystery benefactor might be. Dominic set his phone face down on the table. Josephine, could you give me the room for a moment? Once alone, he crafted a careful response. My foundation contacts are being characteristically tight-lipped, but I've heard Harlow Innovations is involved. Their founder keeps a low profile but apparently has strong interests in medical infrastructure. He hesitated, then added, would it matter who's behind the funding, as long as the resources reach the patients who need them? Olivia's response came quickly, spoken like a true foundation person. Of course it doesn't really matter, we're grateful regardless. But there's something deeply human about wanting to thank the actual person, not just their organization. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here she was, thanking him without knowing it, while he maintained the facade of David, the foundation consultant who understood her world from a comfortable distance. At Memorial General, Olivia tucked her phone away as Prisha approached the breakroom table, practically vibrating with excitement. You will not believe what I just heard, Prisha said, sliding into the chair opposite Olivia. Rumor has it Dominic Harlow himself was here last week during our night shift. Janet from administration said he was part of that late-night meeting with the board. Olivia recalled the group of suits walking through the trauma department, the tall one with the silver at his temples. That's him, apparently worth billions but hardly ever gives interviews or appears publicly. Total tech world enigma. Doesn't seem very enigmatic, Olivia replied, remembering his direct gaze. He actually looked at us like we were people, unlike the other suits. Prisha grinned. Well, don't get too attached. According to Forbes, he's been linked to various high society women but never settles down. Classic billionaire playboy. Something about this characterization bothered Olivia more than it should. Maybe there's more to him than gossip columns suggest. Maybe, Prisha conceded, reaching for Olivia's untouched muffin. Speaking of more, to someone who's the mystery texter that keeps making you smile at your phone. You've been glued to it for weeks. Heat rose to Olivia's cheeks. Just someone I met online. Works in healthcare funding. Nothing serious, right? Prisha dragged out the word skeptically. That's why you're blushing like a teenager. Later that night, unable to sleep despite her exhaustion, Olivia found herself searching Dominic Harlow online. Articles depicted a brilliant but intensely private innovator whose medical diagnostic software had revolutionized early detection of several diseases. His parents had both died young, father from heart disease, mother from complications of multiple sclerosis. Multiple sclerosis. Exactly what David had mentioned about his mother. Coincidence seemed increasingly unlikely. Olivia's stomach tightened as she continued reading. Dominic Harlow had started his foundation after his mother's death, focusing specifically on improving diagnostic processes and patient care experiences. With growing unease, she returned to their text history, re-examining their exchanges with new perspective. The formal language, the odd hours, The insightful questions about healthcare systems, all consistent with someone deeply knowledgeable about medical infrastructure but removed from frontline care. Her phone chimed with a new message from David. Sleep proving elusive tonight. You mentioned once that you have techniques for calming your mind after difficult shifts. Olivia stared at the message, uncertainty churning inside her. Was she texting with Dominic Harlow himself? Had their entire connection been built on a fabrication? Olivia still awake, he prompted after several minutes of her silence. She typed carefully. Just curious about something. Have you ever been to Memorial General in person? The response took longer than usual. Yes, for meetings related to the foundation work. Recently, she pressed. Last week, briefly. Why do you ask? Olivia took a deep breath. Just wondering if we might have passed each other in the halls without realizing. Tall man, dark hair with silver streaks, expensive suit but kind eyes. The three typing dots appeared and disappeared several times before his response finally came through. Olivia, I think we should talk about this. Talk about what? Exactly, she challenged. About how you might be Dominic Harlow instead of David. About how you've been misleading me for weeks. This time, his response was immediate. Not misleading. Protecting something valuable. These conversations have been the most honest I've had in years. Honest? Olivia typed furiously. How is hiding your identity honest? Because wealth and status create distortion. People see the billionaire, not the person. With you, I could just be myself without that interference. Olivia set her phone down, emotions swirling. She understood his reasoning more than she wanted to admit. How many patients had she treated who saw only her scrubs and stethoscope rather than the human wearing them? After several minutes, she picked up her phone again. I need to know. Are you him? The response felt like it took forever to arrive. Yes, I'm Dominic Harlow. Everything else I've shared with you has been completely true, especially the parts about finding unexpected connection with someone who sees the world with both compassion and clarity. I've valued our conversations more than you can know, Olivia. She stared at his confession, a strange mixture of betrayal and validation washing over her. The man behind the philanthropic foundation, the billionaire technology innovator, had been her late-night confidant all along. I need time to process this, she finally replied. Please don't contact me for a while. I understand, came his simple response. For what it's worth, I'm sorry for the deception but not for the connection. Olivia turned her phone face down on her nightstand and curled beneath her blankets, Gatsby settling against her back as tears slipped silently onto her pillow. The digital friendship that had become her solace now felt like quicksand beneath her feet. Across the lakes, Dominic stood at his penthouse window, watching the city lights reflect on the dark water. The wall of privacy he'd maintained for years had protected him from exploitation but had also isolated him completely. A wrong number had accidentally connected him with someone who challenged his perspective daily. Now he'd likely lost that connection forever, all because he'd been too afraid to be honest from the beginning. Asterisk beyond the screen. 3 weeks passed without contact. Olivia threw herself into her work, volunteering for extra shifts as the hospital prepared for the implementation of the Harlow Foundation upgrades. Construction crews had already begun renovations on the pediatric trauma center, and new equipment arrived daily, each item a tangible reminder of the man behind the messages she both missed and resented. You look terrible, Dr. Westbrook commented bluntly as Olivia updated patient charts at the nurse's station, and I mean that with complete medical authority. Thank you for that professional assessment, Olivia replied dryly. I'm fine. The veteran trauma surgeon leaned against the counter. You know, I've been doing this job for 26 years. Want to know what I've learned? Olivia glanced up from her charts. Despite herself, what's that? That fine is the most dangerous word in healthcare. It's what patients say right before their stats crash. It's what staff say before burnout. Nobody who's actually fine ever needs to say they're fine. His observation hit uncomfortably close to home. Olivia had been sleeping poorly, her thoughts continually circling back to Dominic and their conversations, exchanges that had sustained her through difficult shifts and lonely nights. Just going through some personal stuff, she admitted. Nothing that affects my work. Everything affects our work, Westbrook countered. That's why I'm insisting you take tomorrow off. Doctor's orders. Olivia began to protest, but the older physician held up his hand. The new staff wellness center opens tomorrow. Be our test subject. Get a massage. Eat something that didn't come from a vending machine. Talk to the therapist. Consider it research. The next morning, Olivia reluctantly entered the newly renovated wing that had previously housed administrative offices. The transformation was remarkable: soothing colors, comfortable seating, natural light flooding through strategically placed windows. A small cafe offered fresh food, and several private rooms provided spaces for rest or reflection. First visitor, asked a smiling woman at the reception desk. I'm Dr. Eleanor Patel, the wellness coordinator. What can we do for you today? Olivia explained her research assignment from Dr. Westbrook, trying to maintain professional detachment despite her curiosity about the space. Perfect timing, Dr. Patel replied. We're just getting set up. The massage therapist arrives tomorrow, but the reflection spaces and cafe are ready. and I have an hour free if you'd like to talk." Somewhat to her own surprise, Olivia found herself accepting. In Dr. Patel's office, surrounded by plants and bathed in natural light, the professional armor Olivia had maintained began to crack. "Something's bothering you beyond work stress," Dr. Patel observed gently after their initial discussion about hospital challenges. "Would you like to talk about it?" The whole story spilled out: the accidental text, weeks of meaningful conversation, the discovery of Dominic's true identity, and the silence that followed. "You feel betrayed," Dr. Patel summarized. "Yes, no, I don't know." Olivia sighed. "I understand why he hid his identity. If I'd known from the beginning who he was, I probably would have been more guarded, more careful with my words. And that's precisely what he was avoiding," Dr. Patel noted. "The question is, does the deception outweigh the connection you found?" Olivia had no answer, but the question followed her as she explored the rest of the wellness center. In the cafe, she selected a fresh salad and sat by a window overlooking the garden. As she ate, her phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. "The meditation room on the 3rd floor has the best view, northeast corner." Olivia froze, scanning the cafe. No one was watching her. After a moment's hesitation, she took the elevator to the 3rd floor, finding the indicated room empty except for cushions arranged on the floor and a stunning view of Mount Rainier in the distance. She waited 5 minutes, then 10. Just as she turned to leave, the door opened and Dominic Harlow stepped in, looking far less polished than his public photos, dark circles under his eyes, hair slightly disheveled, wearing jeans and a simple button-down rather than his signature suits. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said quietly. Olivia crossed her arms. "I wasn't sure I would either." An uncomfortable silence stretched between them before Dominic spoke again. "I came to apologize in person. No screens, no personas, no distortion." "For which part?" Olivia asked, voice steady despite her racing heart. "The false name or the 6 weeks of conversation under false pretenses? For not trusting you with the truth sooner." He maintained a respectful distance, but not for reaching out that night, not for the conversations that followed. "Those were real, Olivia. The only thing that wasn't real was my name, and the small detail that you're literally funding the hospital where I work." Olivia countered. "Do you know how that looks? How it feels to wonder if I was just some research project on frontline healthcare workers." Pain flashed across his features. "Is that what you think? That our conversations were some kind of data collection exercise? I don't know what to think anymore. That's the problem with deception, it casts doubt on everything else." Dominic nodded slowly. "Fair enough. I won't take more of your time." He reached into his pocket and placed a business card on the windowsill. "My personal number. If you ever want to talk again, no masks, no pretense." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "For what it's worth, the wellness center was designed based on your suggestions about what staff really need. Not as manipulation or bribery, but because you were right. Hospitals designed for medical efficiency, not human emotions, including the emotions of those who provide the care." After he left, Olivia stood motionless, looking out at the mountain. Picard remained on the windowsill, its embossed lettering catching the afternoon light. She left it there when she finally departed, uncertain and conflicted. Recalibrating Hearts, the pediatric trauma center, opened 2 months later with little fanfare but immediate impact. Olivia watched as the first young patients received care in the renovated space. Their families settled in the comfortable waiting areas she'd once described in late-night text messages to a man she thought was named David. "Amazing transformation," Prisha commented as they prepared medications in the new, efficiently designed nurses' station. "And did you hear? Harlow himself declined the dedication ceremony. Requested all focus remain on the medical services, not the donor." Olivia nodded absently, having successfully avoided all hospital events where Dominic might appear. She'd also avoided his business card, though the memory of their encounter in the meditation room lingered. That evening, Dr. Westbrook stopped her as she prepared to leave. "Reyes, got a minute?" She followed him to his office, where he handed her a folder. "Patient came in last week, asked specifically for you, but you were off shift." Olivia opened the folder to find a photograph of a middle-aged woman with kind eyes. Sophia Harlow. The file read, "Deceased 2018. Multiple sclerosis." "I don't understand," Olivia said, looking up at Westbrook. "This patient is deceased." Her son brought the file. Westbrook explained. "Said you'd understand its significance. That it was part of a conversation you'd been having about why people choose healthcare as a profession." Olivia's hands trembled slightly as she continued reading the file. Detailed notes documented years of Sophia being dismissed by physicians, her symptoms attributed to anxiety or stress until the disease had progressed significantly. The final pages included Dominic's personal account of watching his mother's dignity erode alongside her health. "He wanted you to know that everything he told you was true," Westbrook said quietly, "and that the Foundation's work at Memorial General began before you two ever connected. Your conversations only shaped its implementation, not its existence." Tears pricked behind Olivia's eyes. "You know about that?" Westbrook smiled gently. Harlow and I go back 20 years. I treated his mother during her final hospitalization. He's brilliant but guarded for good reason. Fame warps people's perceptions. Why are you telling me this? Because in 26 years of medicine, I've learned that healing happens in unexpected ways. Sometimes it's a surgeon's skill, sometimes it's a nurse's compassion, and sometimes ... He paused. It's finding someone who understands your particular form of damage. Olivia left the hospital clutching the file, her mind racing. At home, she pulled out her phone and finally did what she'd been avoiding for weeks. She pulled up the hospital's press release about the Harlow Foundation grant. The details aligned perfectly with their text. Conversations, family comfort spaces, staff, wellness resources, upgraded equipment. But one element caught her attention: a specialized neurodiagnostic wing named after Sophia Harlow, designed to ensure patients with complex symptoms received comprehensive evaluation before diagnosis. Her phone buzzed unexpectedly. Unknown number. The foundation board meeting just approved funding for 10 nursing scholarships at Memorial General. Thought you should know, since you mentioned staff retention challenges were linked to educational opportunities. Olivia stared at the message. After weeks of silence, he'd reached out about work, not them. Respecting her boundaries while still connecting, that will make a significant difference, she replied carefully. Thank you. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. I miss our conversations. The simple honesty broke something loose inside her. Before she could overthink it, Olivia found herself calling the number. He answered on the first ring. Olivia, I read your mother's file, she said without preamble, and saw the neurodiagnostic wing dedication. I should have told you sooner, Dominic replied, his voice low. About everything. My mother's story, my identity, the foundation's existing commitment to Memorial General. Yes, you should have. Olivia took a deep breath. But I understand why you didn't. Silence stretched between them, more comfortable than their last encounter. I miss our conversations too, she finally admitted. They became important to me as well. The relief in his voice was palpable, more than I realized until they stopped. Olivia found herself smiling despite the tears threatening to spill. So where do we go from here, Mr. Harlow? Dominic, please. And I was hoping we might start with coffee. In person. No secrets, no screens between us. Just 2 people connecting beyond digital distance. Exactly that. The next day they met at a small cafe midway between the hospital and Harlow Innovations headquarters. Sitting across from each other, the initial awkwardness gradually dissolved as conversation found its familiar rhythm. Challenging, genuine. I have one condition, Olivia said as they finished their drinks. For whatever this is between us. Dominic nodded seriously. Name it. No more hospital donations, specifically linked to our conversations. It complicates things. A smile tugged at his lips. Agreed. Though I should mention the nursing scholarships were already in process. Of course they were. Olivia laughed, the sound surprising them both with its ease. As they left the cafe, Dominic hesitated before asking, would it be too forward to request a second meeting? Perhaps dinner this time. Olivia considered him not the billionaire philanthropist or the mysterious texter, but the man standing before her with unguarded hope in his eyes. I think that could be arranged, she replied. On one condition. Another one. When you call to confirm, she said with a small smile, make sure you dial the right number. 3 months later, Olivia's phone rang as she left her shift. The contact photo showed Dominic at Lake Washington, Gatsby unexpectedly perched on his shoulder during a visit to her apartment. Perfect timing, she answered. Just finished my shift. Then I dialed the right number, came his warm reply, their private reference to how it all began. You did, Olivia confirmed, stepping outside into gentle spring rain. You absolutely did.